Good morning, PT on Ice. Happy Monday. It is Monday, the 29th of January. Coming up on February soon. We were sort of going to be here any minute. Get my clock ready here this morning. Hey, Jordan, how are you doing? What's up, Adam? Mark, welcome. Let a couple people kind of sneak in here and then get myself organized. We'll get rolling. So there is a ton to cover. I feel like I've got, I don't know, I'm probably going to miss some stuff, to be honest with you. Try not to, but we'll see if we can get going. But in the spirit of keeping people on time on Monday, kicking off the week the right way, I'm going to get started. So, good. All right, and we're off. So we have a lot going on, a lot to talk about. And I don't know how we can kind of cover it. Hey, thanks, Jordan. That was quite a compliment on the beard there. Thanks. Yeah, this is about the longest I've ever let it go. I don't know if I can. I don't know. We'll see. It's kind of like an itchy factor thing for me. One day I'll just kind of get rid of it. So what we're got a couple of things to kind of cover. First and foremost, shout out to the winter cohort. We got the APHT winter cohort is kind of rocking. They are a solid group and got a lot going on. I saw Jason sign on there. He's a part of it, and just got to take a quick look at his Unit 2 assignment. They are kind of moving along well. And the reason why I bring them up is because one of the things that we're going to talk about today is really what's going on in that cohort is incredibly relevant, which is that we have our first non-PT in the group. And what I mean by that is not always a PT. We've had students in the past, but this is someone who comes from an OT background, and so that was is a really cool thing for me because it's a nice test. It kind of lays right into where I think we need to go as professions overall. So that was a shout out to our first OT, and then tomorrow I'm off to kind of start the tour of colleges and universities, and you'll see how kind of this all plays in. So shout out to Sean Seebeck, who brought me, actually was the person who kind of asked me to be a part of DeSales University last year and give a lecture there. So I'm heading back there tomorrow, and then I've got Rutgers and Kane University coming up soon after that. Podcast with Andrew Rothschild. He's got something cooking, so we're going to do that pretty soon. And then some stuff going on for CSM. All of that kind of comes back into, a part of today, which is the APHPT crew and what they've got going on, and there's just a whole bunch there. So what does that all have to do with kind of this topic of, stop trying to beat the competition? One more thing that I should mention is that today, not quite today, February 1st, a couple days from now, is the beginning, the starting kickoff of the Rising Tide training plan. So for those people, and apologies in the background there, my dogs are shaking and scratching. But the folks who are going to the Rising Tide in New Mexico, February 1st is the initial kickoff for training. So at least for me, and I'm going to be starting on the APHPT Workplace Community a training group. So you'll see that in there, and I'll just kind of start dropping some nuggets in there, and probably nothing super formal, but at least what I'm doing to get ready. In addition to growing out the beard. So the start there is base training. So I come from kind of an endurance world, so I don't know if these terms are the same everywhere, that if everybody uses these, but I use the idea of base training, which essentially is getting started, kind of getting your body awake and ready. And for me, it's about consistency. So I'll be working on my aerobic base, just kind of, how long can I kind of keep the body going at a heart rate that's reasonable, and also my mental endurance. So I'm up to about 2 hours. I did about a 2-hour trail run the other day, a couple days back, and that was solid. My body didn't, revolt, so that was pretty good. And then some movement quality stuff. So really trying to work on, getting through my ranges and getting through my motions and starting to add some load and wake the body up. So that was the final announcement. If you are a Rising Tide person, if we're going to be seeing you in September, late September in New Mexico, it is time. It's time to get started and start training. So that's an important thing. All right, so what is all of that, with the exception of the Rising Tide piece, what does that all have to do with today's topic of trying to beat the competition or stopping trying to beat the competition? So to do that, I kind of feel like I have to start from, way zoomed out and, what has been the theme here with this PT on Ice. And, ultimately the theme, hopefully people get it, it should be very, very clear, is that people are not thriving, right? So the population overall, the people, the people that we interface with, they're not thriving. And we measure that not by just their health markers. Their health markers are certainly helpful, but we don't end it there. What we really measure is total well-being, happiness, thriving. Like I'm feeling good about my life, which is of course bigger than just I'm feeling good about my health, which of course is bigger than I'm feeling good about my shoulder, which of course is I'm feeling bigger and better than my biceps tendon, right? So we have this tendency as health professionals to want a kind of reduction, sort of reductionist view, get it down and say, hey, let's talk about that tendon because that is what we're being paid to deal with. And to me, in my mind, that is the idea of kind of reductionism 101, that we're going to somehow extrapolate up the chain, and that's not really the case, right? So what most people want is high well-being, happy life over the long period. So that idea of, kind of people are not there. Then secondly is this Goldilocks phenomenon, which we of course see every day, but the Goldilocks phenomenon being, hey, not too much, not too little, just right. And so the idea of, we can be overloaded or underloaded and not thrive. And either one of those is fine. And of course, I'm using that not just from the physical loading perspective that we often hear about, but what I'm talking about is overall load on the system, right? So what are the threats to well-being? What are the threats to feeling good? The idea of overloaded on the system. And we know that can come from anywhere, right? So that overload can come from a lot of places, including us. And so one of the things that Perry brought up last week was the idea of, not communicating well. And so in a sense, we're not communicating well, and we are then under or overloading the person in front of us or the groups that we're dealing with. And the issue there is that when we're outside of that when we're outside of that U-shaped phenomenon, and we're outside of the Goldilocks, we're increasing load. So of course, I like that term allostasis. It's not the only term. Lots of people have kind of used this in different ways, but I like the term allostasis, which is the idea of chronically cranking along. So that gets us down to our next thing, which is, all right, so if people are not thriving, meaning that they're not high levels of well-being, and in addition to that, we're outside of that Goldilocks phenomenon, then 3, the current model of care cannot necessarily do what we want it to do. Like, it's had a long enough run. It's not doing what we want it to do. And so from my perspective, the current model cannot solve the problem. Like, it just can't. The numbers aren't there. The people aren't there. The providers can't do it alone. We can't do it in isolation. Inside the walls of a clinic isn't going to pull it off. There's just so many reasons why this can't happen. And I'm not going to list them all. But the idea is very simple. Like, it can't be done as it currently is being done. We're not going to just do more of what we're doing and eventually move the needle. Like, it just won't happen. So what that means is ultimately that model as a competitor, if we can use that idea, that model is largely irrelevant. And I sort of say that for a second, and I'll pause here and say, okay, it's a sad day. We should just kind of allow ourselves to get there, and we are in the middle of grieving that, right? Like that's kind of the stages of grief in professionalism. As it stands today, the model that's been around forever, which is, health provider knows best. I bring you a problem, you solve it quickly. That model is dead. Okay, and that's my opinion. It's an irrelevant model. And the reason why it's an irrelevant model is because it can't solve the actual problem. So we can work back up the chain of what I just said. So if we can get there, then I think we can get through the grieving process. Now, in a sense, this is a bit of a shout out to guys like Jerry Durham. Jerry has done a nice job of kind of holding true to his conceptual framework that it's about the experience. That it's not about the service, that it's about the experience, and that's what's driving people to use or not use. And so I think that there is something there. There's a really important point there. But the idea is that if we can get through the grieving process, then and only then can we begin to do something better. And so what I guess what I'm trying to say here is I don't think the folks at Amazon were all that worried about Macy's. Now I don't know if everyone in the country has Macy's, but in the New York metro area, Macy's is been around forever. Obviously, the Macy's Day Parade in New York City, and there's a lot there. But I just don't think they woke up one day and said, "Hey, we're going to build this thing so that we can steal business from Macy's." I just don't think they cared. And maybe they did, and I could be way off, but I think they said, hey, we've got something that we think will just make that model irrelevant overall. Now, to do that, right, to actually say, yeah, like to make one-on-one care irrelevant, right? And the closest I can tell you this is there was a CEO of Geisinger Health System who basically said, listen, if I'm doing this right, I'm a CEO of a hospital system. If I'm doing this right, I'm putting myself out of business. Right? I love that because he's very clear on the idea of if populations get healthy, we don't need sick care anymore. Now, what he didn't say there is that there will not be a role for Geisinger. Right? They'll shift, they'll pivot, they'll change, they'll do things differently because the population overall will shift. And I feel like that is what that's where the smart money is right now. So to go one step further, what I would tell you is I think every physical therapist, every occupational therapist, every speech language pathologist, every professional needs to own their own business because they need to be forced into this economic conversation, which is there's macro forces at play. Those are the things that help us shift the population. And then there are micro forces at play, the thing that we might do with the person on the ground. Now here's the caveat, right? I'm not saying that one-on-one care is bad, and I'm not saying that we should not do it. I'm just saying that our entire existence built on this idea is irrelevant. It is not possible to do that over the long term. And so the concept of saying, well, I'm going to do everything I can to focus on this, one-on-one, inefficient, highly expensive, drive the costs up, make a lot of money per unit idea, like that goes against everywhere the world is trying to go. Where the world is trying to go is democratization of things, see the costs go down, see technologies get cheaper over time. So we are at odds there. Providers are at odds with the way the world is going. This idea of I want to be micro-focused and I want to, basically, charge a whole lot for a tiny little thing that I'm going to do, and I'm going to carve out my turf and I'm going to make sure nobody can go and infiltrate that turf. That concept is irrelevant. Whereas the Bezos model, the Amazon of, hey, we're just going to basically come in and begin to slowly and steadily filter into everything that you do in life. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because I had a really nice experience last week, and one that I'll be talking to the APHT folks, especially the cohort about a little bit more. I was asked to come in, friend of a friend kind of a thing, asked to come in and talk to a company who, is looking at putting some kind of a wellness thing in place. They have a decent population of people, somewhere in the, 500, employee range. And basically I went in and they said, so what is it that you do? And what I said was, well, ultimately I'm an architect. And they kind of looked at me funny, and I said, basically, that's my job, right? I come in and, if you were going to build a brand new home on some piece of land that you just, purchased, I would hope you would hire an architect. That you wouldn't just walk in and start buying boards and screwing things together and hoping that somehow it's going to be a house when you're done. I would hope you'd buy somebody who can lay out the blueprint and explain how all these things work and give you an understanding. And then if you want to hire me to be the contractor too, well, okay, we can work with that. But really, you may just want to hire me to give you the blueprint. And you can go build it yourself with your own resources. And okay, I can live with that. But that kind of stopped them in their tracks. It sort of blew their mind. And the reason why was because here was a provider coming in and basically saying, listen, I'm not going to deliver services here necessarily. If you want me to, I will. But honestly, that idea of coming in and trying to, rally your troops to come see me in my clinic, that's an irrelevant model. Because what you really told me you wanted, what you really wanted here, the house you want to build is a healthier workforce, a thriving workforce, a group of people who are, there's well-being, that people are feeling good about themselves. And if that's the end goal, then I am not going to do that one-on-one in my clinic. And I am not going to do that one-on-one with your folks. Now, will we need to do some of that? Sure. Will there be cases where that's valuable? Absolutely. Will I refer those out to traditional care providers? Probably in some cases. But what I think you really need is an architect. And so to do that, that takes an openness, I think, on our part to walk in and say, well, I can get paid for doing things besides what I need to do with my hands or that service that I deliver. But it really takes more than anything a deep belief, a deep concept that we are completely shifting. That this idea of crafting and changing the status quo and turning it into something that is workable, like that will never, ever work. Like the ship has sailed, the train has left the station, however many different horrible metaphors and analogies you want. Understand the old way of doing things is rapidly becoming non-existent. And if you want to continue on that train, like, good luck. I hope it works out. I hope I'm wrong. I wake up every day hoping that I'm wrong about this. But if you pay attention to everything else going on in the world, everything else around us, the democratization of communication, right? The ability for people to communicate one-on-one anywhere in the world with anyone, regardless of their socioeconomic status. Almost every person on the planet has some kind of a smart device at this point, when we think about everybody with the exception of the poorest of the poor, like third world countries. In our country, almost everyone has it, including people below the poverty line. So the communication is completely different. Oh man, that's 15 minutes and I got tons to keep going. All right, so it looks like there'll be a chapter 2 here. Bottom line is this. Okay, there has been a fundamental shift. Okay, that hence the name, the name at APHPT, a fundamentally different way to care. Not a tweaked change in care, not a, hey, let's brush it up and call it something different way of care, a fundamentally different way of doing things. And I think until we embrace that, until we say, I have to be prepared because the world is shifting, right? The tectonic plates of healthcare are shifting, and I want to be standing on the right side of this thing when it goes down. I think if we can get there, then we can begin to actually build something. Then we can start to lay out. And I honestly think that that makes us, or those who are qualified, ready, trained, and have their head on straight, as the architects. The ones who are going to be building the blueprint and teaching people and getting where we want to go and putting the structures together. All right, wow. So yeah, that's a rabbit hole. I'll get it maybe another time. So it's only Monday. There's a lot going on, a lot to do. Training starts soon. Get ready to rock. If you're in Rising Tide, start getting fit. It's only Monday, everybody. Make it count.